Hey everyone, and welcome back to Mind's Quotes. I'm your host, and today we're embarking on one of the most profound journeys you'll ever experience. A deep dive into Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. This isn't just another book summary. This is a complete exploration of one of humanity's most powerful philosophies, born from the darkest chapter in human history. Viktor Frankl survived the Nazi concentration camps and emerged with insights that have transformed millions of lives across the globe. We're going to unpack every major concept, every life-changing principle, and every practical application that this masterpiece offers. If you've ever felt lost, questioned your purpose, struggled with suffering, or wonder how some people find hope in hopeless situations, then this video will revolutionize your understanding of what it means to be human. We'll explore not just what Frankl discovered in the camps, but how his revolutionary approach to psychology, called logotherapy, can transform your daily life. Before we begin this incredible journey together, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. This book has sold over 12 million copies worldwide and has been translated into 24 languages. By the end of this video, you'll understand why it's considered one of the 10 most influential books in American history. Let's dive deep. Viktor Frankl, the man behind the philosophy. To truly understand the power of Frankl's insights, we need to understand the extraordinary man who developed them. Viktor Emil Frankl was born in Vienna, Austria, on March 26, 1905, into a middle-class Jewish family. From an early age, he showed exceptional intelligence and a deep fascination with human psychology. As a teenager, Frankl began corresponding with Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis. By age 20, he was already presenting papers on the psychology of motivation to the Vienna Psychoanalytic Society. But unlike Freud, who believed humans were primarily driven by pleasure and libido, young Frankl was developing different ideas that would later save his life and millions of others. Frankl earned his medical degree in 1930 and specialized in neurology and psychiatry. He was particularly interested in depression and suicide prevention, working with suicidal patients and developing innovative therapeutic approaches. Little did he know that these early experiences would prepare him for the ultimate test of his theories. In the 1930s, as Nazi influence grew in Austria, Frankl could have escaped to America. He had been offered a visa and a position at an American university. But here's what shows you the character of this man. He chose to stay in Vienna to take care of his aging parents, knowing full well the danger this posed to his own life. In 1942, Frankl, his wife Tilly, and his parents were deported to their Seisenstadt concentration camp. This was the beginning of a 3-year journey through 4 different Nazi camps, including the infamous Auschwitz-Birkenau. His wife, parents, and brother all perished in the camps. Frankl alone survived, and what he learned during those 3 years would change our understanding of human nature forever. The manuscript that changed everything. Here's a story that perfectly captures Frankl's character and sets up his entire philosophy. When Frankl arrived at Auschwitz, hidden in the lining of his coat was a manuscript, his life's work up to that point. It was a book about his revolutionary approach to psychotherapy, which he had been developing for years. The Nazi guards discovered the manuscript and threw it away like trash. Can you imagine? Years of work, your intellectual legacy, your contribution to humanity, gone in an instant. Most people would have been devastated, perhaps even given up hope entirely. But Frankl's response reveals the core of his philosophy. Instead of despair, Frankl felt a burning determination. He would recreate that manuscript, not on paper, but in his mind. He began mentally reconstructing every page, every concept, every insight. But more than that, he began testing his theories in the most extreme laboratory imaginable, the concentration camps themselves. He started observing fellow prisoners with the eye of a psychiatrist. He noticed patterns in who survived and who didn't. He saw how some prisoners maintained their humanity, while others became brutal. He observed the psychology of hope and despair playing out in life-and-death situations. This wasn't academic research. This was survival research. Every day in the camps, Frankl was mentally preparing lectures he would give after the war. He imagined standing before audiences, sharing these insights. This mental exercise wasn't just intellectual, it was spiritual. It gave him a reason to live when everything else had been stripped away. The 3 phases of camp psychology. Frankl identified 3 distinct psychological phases that prisoners experience, and understanding these phases reveals profound truths about human nature and resilience. Phase 1. Shock, the initial response. The first phase began with arrest and transportation. Frankl describes the initial shock as a kind of psychological numbness. Prisoners couldn't believe what was happening to them. There was a sense of unreality, as if this were happening to someone else. Upon arrival at Auschwitz, prisoners were subjected to the selection process, the infamous moment where Nazi officers decided who would go immediately to the gas chambers and who would be kept for labor. Frankl described standing in line, watching as people were directed left or right, not knowing that one direction meant immediate death. Those selected for labor were then stripped of everything, clothes, possessions, even their hair. Frankl writes, "We really had nothing now except our bare bodies, even minus hair. All we possessed literally was our naked existence." But here's what's remarkable. Even in this moment of ultimate dehumanization, Frankl was observing, learning, preparing for the insights that would later help millions. The shock phase included what Frankl called delusions of reprieve, the psychological mechanism where prisoners convinced themselves that somehow they would be spared. Surely, they thought, this can't be happening to me. This denial was actually a protective mechanism, allowing the psyche to gradually adjust to an impossible reality. Phase 2. Apathy, the adaptation. The second phase was characterized by emotional deadening, what Frankl called apathy. This wasn't oppression exactly, but rather a shutting down of normal emotional responses as a survival mechanism. Prisoners became indifferent to punishment, to the sight of death, even to their own suffering. Frankl describes how he stopped feeling disgust at the camp's terrible conditions, stopped feeling pain from beatings, stopped feeling horror at witnessing brutality. This emotional numbness was actually adaptive. Those who remained too sensitive often didn't survive psychologically. During this phase, Frankl made a crucial observation that would become central to his later philosophy. The prisoners who survived weren't necessarily the physically strongest or those with the best conditions. The survivors were those who had found a meaning, a why for their suffering. They had something to live for beyond their immediate circumstances. Some prisoners lived for the hope of seeing their families again. Others lived to bear witness to what had happened. Frankl lived to share his psychological insights with the world. Those who lost their why, their reason for living, often died shortly afterward, not primarily from physical causes, but from what we might call spiritual starvation. Phase 3. Liberation and readjustment, the aftermath. The third phase began with liberation, but Frankl's insights here shatter our assumptions about freedom and happiness. You might expect that liberation would bring immediate joy and relief, but Frankl describes a different reality. Many prisoners experienced what he called depersonalization. Everything seemed unreal, dreamlike. They had lived for so long with the single goal of survival that sudden freedom left them psychologically disoriented. Some survivors struggle with intense guilt about outliving friends and family members. Perhaps most surprisingly, many liberated prisoners went through a phase of what Frankl called moral deformation, a tendency toward bitterness and cruelty. Having been dehumanized for so long, some felt justified in treating others badly. This phase taught Frankl that suffering alone doesn't automatically make people better. It's what we do with our suffering that matters. The birth of logotherapy. From these experiences emerged Frankl's revolutionary approach to psychology and psychiatry, logotherapy. To understand why this was so revolutionary, we need to understand what came before it. The 3 schools of psychology. The first Viennese school of psychotherapy was founded by Sigmund Freud and was based on the will to pleasure. Freud believed that human behavior is primarily motivated by the seeking of pleasure and the avoidance of pain, particularly related to suppressed sexual desires. The second Viennese school was developed by Alfred Adler and focused on the will to power. Adler argued that humans are primarily motivated by the drive for superiority, control, and dominance over their environment and others. Frankl established what became known as the Third Viennese School of Psychotherapy, based on the will to meaning. He argued that the primary human drive is neither pleasure nor power, but the search for meaning and purpose in life. The revolutionary insight: Here's what makes logotherapy so revolutionary. While traditional psychotherapy often focuses on reducing symptoms or exploring past trauma, logotherapy is future-oriented. It's less concerned with why you have problems and more concerned with what you're going to do about them. It's not about achieving a tension-free state, but about finding tension worth having. Frankl writes, "What man actually needs is not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for some goal worthy of him." This completely flips our cultural assumption that we should seek ease and comfort. Instead, Frankl suggests we should seek meaningful challenges. The logo-theoretical basis. The word logos is Greek for meaning, so logotherapy literally means healing through meaning. But Frankl's concept of meaning is sophisticated and multifaceted. He identified 3 sources through which people can discover meaning in life. 1. Creative values, what we give the world: work, deeds, achievements. 2. Experiential values, what we take from the world: goodness, truth, beauty, love. 3. Attitudinal values, the stance we take toward unavoidable suffering. This third category was Frankl's most original contribution. He realized that when we can no longer change our situation, we can still choose our attitude toward it. This choice of attitude can transform even the worst circumstances into opportunities for spiritual growth and meaningful action. The 3 sources of meaning. Deep dive. Let's explore each source of meaning in depth, because understanding these can literally transform your life. Creative values, what we give the world. Creative values are probably the easiest to understand because they align with what most of us think of as achievement. This includes our work, our contributions to society, our artistic expressions, our innovations, and our service to others. For Frankl, his creative value was his psychological work. Even when his manuscript was destroyed, he continued developing his theories mentally. He found meaning in the idea that he would someday share these insights to help reduce human suffering. But here's what's crucial. Creative values don't have to be grandiose. A teacher finds meaning in educating children. A parent finds meaning in raising their family. A janitor can find meaning in creating clean, healthy environments for others. The key is not the external recognition or reward, but the inner sense that your work matters. Frankl emphasized that work becomes meaningful when it's irreplaceable, when it reflects something unique that only you can contribute. This doesn't mean you have to be famous or extraordinary, but rather that you approach your work with a sense of responsibility and purpose. Experiential values, what we take from the world. Experiential values involve our encounters with truth, beauty, love, and meaningful relationships. These are the moments when we transcend our immediate circumstances and connect with something greater than ourselves. In the concentration camps, Frankl found meaning in his love for his wife. He didn't even know if she was still alive, but he would imagine conversations with her, remember her smile, feel her presence. These experiences of love provided meaning even in the midst of horror. Frankl also describes moments of natural beauty that provided profound meaning: a sunset visible from the camp, the way light fell on a mountain, moments of human compassion between prisoners. These experiences of beauty and love couldn't be taken away by external circumstances. Here's what's profound about experiential values. They're available to everyone, regardless of circumstances. You don't need wealth, status, or perfect health to experience love, beauty, or truth. A person lying in a hospital bed can find meaning in a conversation with a friend, in music playing on the radio, in the kindness of a nurse. Attitudinal values, our response to unavoidable suffering. This is Frankl's most revolutionary contribution to human psychology. Attitudinal values come into play when we face situations we cannot change: illness, loss, injustice, aging, death. In these moments, meaning comes not from changing our circumstances, but from choosing our response to them. Frankl shares a story of a young woman dying of cancer who found profound meaning in her final months. She couldn't change her diagnosis, but she chose to face it with courage, grace, and love for her family. Her attitude toward her suffering transformed her final days from mere tragedy into something meaningful and even beautiful. Another powerful example is a doctor whose beloved wife had died. He came to Frankl in deep depression. Instead of offering comfort, Frankl asked him, "What would have happened if you had died first and your wife had to survive and mourn you?" The man replied that it would have been terrible for her. Frankl then pointed out, "You see, doctor, such a sufferer has been spared her, and it was you who spared her the suffering, to be sure, at the price that now you have to survive and mourn her." The situation hadn't changed. The wife was still dead. But the man's attitude toward his grief was transformed. He found meaning in his suffering by seeing it as a loving sacrifice that spared his wife from pain. The freedom to choose. Perhaps the most powerful and practical insight in Frankl's entire philosophy is his understanding of human freedom. Even in the concentration camps, the ultimate example of external constraint, Frankl discovered freedom that no force could take away. The freedom to choose our attitude toward our circumstances. The last of human freedoms. Frankl writes, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing. The last of human freedoms. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. To choose one's own way." This isn't just inspirational rhetoric. This is based on careful observation of human behavior under extreme conditions. In the camps, Frankl witnessed prisoners facing identical external conditions who responded in completely different ways. Some became bitter, cruel, and abandoned their moral values. Others became more compassionate, more spiritual, more determined to help fellow prisoners. The difference wasn't in their circumstances. It was in their chosen response to those circumstances. The space between stimulus and response. Frankl's insight aligns with what other philosophers and psychologists have noted. There's a space between what happens to us and our response to what happens to us. In that space lies our freedom and our opportunity for growth. Most people react automatically to their circumstances. Someone cuts them off in traffic, and they immediately become angry. They receive criticism, and they immediately become defensive. They face a setback, and they immediately become discouraged. But Frankl's philosophy suggests that we can expand that space between stimulus and response. We can pause, consider our options, and choose our response based on our values rather than our immediate emotions. This is what transforms us from victims of circumstances into architects of meaning, responsibility, and freedom. Frankl emphasized that freedom is always coupled with responsibility. We're free to choose our attitude, but we're responsible for the consequences of that choice. This responsibility isn't a burden. It's what gives our freedom meaning. When we take responsibility for our responses, we reclaim our power. Instead of being at the mercy of external events, we become active participants in shaping our experience of life. This doesn't mean we can control outcomes, but we can always control our input. Practical applications of this freedom. How do we apply this in daily life? Here are some practical strategies. 1. The pause practice. When faced with a challenging situation, practice pausing before responding. Ask yourself, what response would align with my values and who I want to become? 2. Reframing questions. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Ask, what can I learn from this? Or how can this experience serve a greater purpose? 3. Values-based decision-making. Make choices based on your deepest values rather than immediate emotions or impulses. 4. The growth mindset. View challenges as opportunities for development rather than threats to avoid. The existential vacuum. One of Frankl's most prescient insights was his identification of what he called the existential vacuum, a pervasive sense of meaninglessness that he predicted would become increasingly common in modern society. Looking at our world today, his prediction seems remarkably accurate. What is the existential vacuum? The existential vacuum is a state of inner emptiness, a feeling that life lacks purpose or significance. Frankl observed that as societies become more prosperous and people have their basic needs met, many begin to struggle with questions of meaning and purpose. Unlike previous generations who were focused primarily on survival, modern people often find themselves asking, now what? They have food, shelter, safety, and even luxury, but they feel empty inside. They experience what Frankl called Sunday neurosis, a depression that comes when the week's activities stop and people are left alone with themselves. Symptoms of the existential vacuum. Frankl identified several ways the existential vacuum manifests. 1. Boredom, a chronic sense that nothing is really interesting or worth doing. 2. Conformity, following the crowd because you don't know what you yourself want. 3. Totalitarianism, Following authoritarian leaders because making your own decisions feels too difficult. 4. Addiction, using substances, activities, or relationships to fill the inner emptiness. 5. Depression and anxiety, psychological symptoms that often stem from meaninglessness rather than chemical imbalances alone. The will to meaning versus the will to pleasure. Frankl argued that when people can't find meaning, they often substitute pleasure. But pleasure-seeking as a primary life strategy leads to what he called the pleasure paradox. The more directly we pursue pleasure, the more it eludes us. True satisfaction comes not from seeking pleasure for its own sake, but as a byproduct of meaningful activity. This insight is particularly relevant in our consumer culture, where we're constantly told that happiness comes from buying things, seeking experiences, or maximizing comfort. Frankl suggests this approach is backwards. Happiness and pleasure come naturally when we're engaged in meaningful pursuits. The meaning-centered approach. Instead of asking, "How can I be happy?" Frankl suggests asking, "How can I be useful?" Instead of, "What do I want from life?" ask, "What does life want from me?" This shift from self-focus to purpose-focus naturally leads to greater satisfaction and resilience. Practical applications for modern life. Now, let's get practical. How do we apply Frankl's insights to the challenges we face in our daily lives? I'm going to give you specific strategies for common situations. Finding your personal mission. Frankl emphasized that meaning is unique to each individual and even changes from situation to situation. You can't copy someone else's meaning. You have to discover your own. Here are some questions to help. 1. What activities make you lose track of time? 2. What problems in the world upset you most? Often our pain points to our purpose. 3. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? 4. What do people consistently come to you for help with? 5. If you had unlimited resources, how would you spend your time? Career and work applications. Many people feel trapped in meaningless jobs. Frankl's approach offers several strategies. 1. Find meaning within your current role. Look for ways your work serves others, contributes to something larger, or develops your character. 2. Create meaning alongside your job. If your day job isn't meaningful, pursue meaningful activities in your free time, volunteer work, creative projects, or learning new skills. 3. Transform your approach. Even mundane tasks can become meaningful when approached with the right attitude. A data entry clerk can find meaning in accuracy and reliability that supports important decisions. 4. Plan your transition. If your work is truly incompatible with your values, create a meaningful plan to transition to something better while maintaining your responsibilities. Relationship applications. Frankl's insights about love and meaning are profound. 1. Love as self-transcendence. True love involves focusing on a beloved's potential and helping them become their best self. 2. Meaning through service. Strong relationships are built on mutual service rather than mutual use. 3. Growth through conflict. Relationship challenges can become opportunities for developing patience, forgiveness, and understanding. 4. Legacy thinking. Ask how your relationships contribute to something that will outlast your lifetime. Health and aging applications. As we age or face health challenges, meaning becomes especially important. 1. Wisdom sharing. Older adults can find meaning in mentoring younger people and sharing life lessons. 2. Character development. Health challenges can become opportunities to develop courage, patience, and grace. 3. Gratitude practice. Focusing on what remains rather than what's been lost. 4. Service within limitations. Finding ways to contribute even when physical capabilities are reduced. Financial stress applications. Money problems are a major source of suffering, but Frankl's approach offers perspective. 1. Values clarification. Financial stress often comes from pursuing someone else's definition of success. 2. Meaning before money. When we pursue meaningful work, financial success often follows more naturally than when we chase money directly. 3. Gratitude and perspective. Remembering that most of us live better than royalty did just a few centuries ago. 4. Service focus. Finding ways to help others even when our own resources are limited. The tragic optimism. One of Frankl's most sophisticated concepts is what he called tragic optimism. the ability to maintain hope and find meaning despite life's inevitable tragedies. This isn't naive optimism that pretends everything is fine, nor is it pessimistic resignation. It's a mature acceptance that suffering is part of life, combined with a determination to find meaning within that suffering. The three aspects of tragic optimism. Frankl identified three sources of potential tragedy in human existence and showed how each could be transformed into something meaningful. 1. Pain and suffering. Instead of seeing pain as purely negative, tragic optimism recognizes that suffering can lead to personal growth, increased empathy, and spiritual development. The key is not seeking suffering for its own sake, but extracting meaning when suffering is unavoidable. 2. Guilt and mistakes. Rather than being crushed by past mistakes, tragic optimism sees guilt as an opportunity for genuine change and growth. Our mistakes can become the foundation for wisdom and the motivation for better choices. 3. Death and mortality. Instead of being paralyzed by the reality of death, tragic optimism recognizes that our mortality gives urgency and preciousness to our choices. The fact that life is limited makes it more, not less, meaningful. Living with uncertainty. Tragic optimism also involves accepting that we can't control outcomes, but we can always control our effort and attitude. This is especially relevant in our current world, where so much feels uncertain and beyond our control. The defiant human spirit. Frankl wrote about the defiant human spirit, our capacity to rise above our circumstances through the power of meaning. This defiance isn't rebellion against legitimate authority, but rather a refusal to be defined by external circumstances alone. Logotherapy techniques. Before we conclude, let me share some specific techniques from logotherapy that you can apply immediately. Paradoxical intention. This technique involves deliberately intending the very thing you fear. If you're afraid of sweating in social situations, you intentionally try to sweat as much as possible. Often, this breaks the cycle of anticipatory anxiety that makes the problem worse. Dereflection. This involves shifting attention away from yourself and towards something or someone else. Instead of constantly monitoring your anxiety or depression, focus on how you can serve others or contribute to meaningful causes. Value clarification. Regularly examine and clarify your core values. Ask yourself, what matters most to me? What kind of person do I want to be? What legacy do I want to leave? Meaning detection. Practice looking for meaning in everyday situations. How does this challenge help me grow? How can this experience help me serve others better? What is this situation teaching me? Call to action. Friends, we've just completed an incredible journey through one of the most profound books ever written. Viktor Frankl showed us that no matter what happens to us, we always retain the freedom to choose our response. He demonstrated that meaning can be found in any circumstance, and that the search for meaning is a primary human motivation. The three sources of meaning, creative values, experiential values, and attitudinal values, are available to every one of us right now. Whether you're facing major challenges or everyday struggles, whether you're young or old, healthy or sick, wealthy or struggling financially, you have the opportunity to live a meaningful life. Your homework from this video is simple but powerful. Identify one area of your life where you can apply these insights this week. Maybe it's reframing a challenge you're facing, pursuing a creative project that excites you, or deepening a relationship that matters. Whatever it is, take action. Remember, life is asking you questions, and you answer through how you live. If this extended exploration of man's search for meaning has impacted you, please hit that like button and subscribe to Mind's Quotes for more in-depth book summaries and philosophical explorations. Share this with someone who might need to hear Frankl's message of hope and meaning. And let me know in the comments, what insight resonated most with you? How are you going to apply these principles in your life? Remember Viktor Frankl's ultimate message. The one thing no one can take away from you is your freedom to choose your response to life. Use that freedom wisely, use it courageously, and use it to create a life of meaning and purpose. Until next time, keep searching, keep growing, and keep finding meaning in your magnificent journey. Thanks for watching Mind's Quotes, and I'll see you in the next deep dive.